Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion, Why Network Detection Matters More Than Ever, sponsored by Vectra on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Brian Varine, the Associate Director of Guidehouse Advanced Cyber Solutions. Now, Brian, before break, we were talking about the SolarWinds breach and how potentially network detection and response would have made a huge difference had agencies really had a mature capability there. So let's talk about network detection and response, or NDR, as we will hear each other say to limit how many times we have to say that phrase. But what goes into good network detection and response capabilities? What should agencies keep in mind as they start to ramp them up in their security operations centers?
Yeah, the whole NDR space has really changed over the last 5 years. As I stated before, traditional, what we call IDS, was focused at the perimeter, and it was some of them were focused on blocking activity. So if you didn't have a signature and you didn't have a very good pattern to look for, it was very difficult for those network systems to detect anything. Plus, they just had a huge amount of false alarms. I've been doing intrusion detection since late 90s, and some alerts, I mean, we would see thousands of alerts every 10 minutes. So you had to tune them, and you had to do a lot of work with these. Some of the more modern NDR, they're using advanced artificial intelligence, machine learning, and they're kind of doing a lot of the work of analyzing what's happening on the network, what's normal, and they're doing a lot of parsing of a lot of the metadata that you see within the network. The other problem we have is that a lot of the network traffic has become encrypted. So there's not a lot of data. The payloads, the malicious payload that you might see is encrypted. So with these modern NDRs, they're kind of building a network profile of activity, what's going on, how much traffic is being passed, and they're looking for patterns that sound real simple to make a detection engine for, but it's actually pretty difficult to do that with scripts or like a SIM or things like that. The other thing that's happened is the amount of network traffic that we're starting to monitor is just crazy. When my first IDS, I mean, I thought we were rocking pretty hard when we had a 5 megabit firewall connection. Well, now I have 100 meg at my house. So most enterprises, it's not unusual to have 10 gig links linking your buildings, data centers. And for the things like data centers, it's not uncommon to see 40 gigs. So the amount of traffic that you're looking at now is just massive. Plus, especially with federal agencies, they're highly federated. So you have multiple networks within a network. So trying to monitor and keep track of who's who and how are these guys set up, it's very, very difficult for a security analyst to do. And that's where the promise of AI and ML has started to bear some fruit. And I think some of these new technologies are really promising.
One of the things I'm just going to go on if you put up with me for 30 seconds, I'll go on a soapbox for a second, because you brought up something I think that's really important for people to understand, is there are a lot of stories in the mainstream press, and I'm picking on my friends at the Washington Post and the New York Times and others, when they started to shake their fists at the Einstein program and saying, the government spent billions of dollars, but Einstein didn't pick this up. But your point is really important here, because it was a known signature or a known pattern, and that's how you kind of kept out the IDS. What we're talking about here is maybe the unknown, or at least the lesser known. And I think that's why network detection and response has become, if you will, back into vogue, more important than ever. And then when you throw the cloud into that, that makes your network even more broader. It's not just a data center or a couple of data centers. It's the cloud, right? So walk me through kind of how all those pieces fit together, of the cloud and this idea of the changing idea of what the network is.
Yeah, the network, it's really expanded over the last 5 years, particularly. It was very unusual in the past to see an enterprise have, a direct line to some offsite data center somewhere without going through a firewall or without going through a stack of security. With cloud, we have direct connects, express routes, and those are direct pipes into the cloud without any monitoring capability. I think a lot of enterprises are forgetting to put monitoring right there. Plus, the type of monitoring that was available was traditional IDS, again, looking for malicious traffic and things like that. But if I'm the bad guy and I breach your cloud instance, the malicious code's not going to be used when I enter your network. So I'm going to steal some credentials, I'm going to steal some tokens, and I'm going to enter your network through the cloud. The other thing, traditional IDS were not very good at correlating across sensors. So I might have 10, 15 sensors. if the malicious traffic or the bad traffic passed between 3 sensors, I'd get 3 alerts, not being correlated together and understanding that, hey, that's actually the same traffic. And with some of the new NDR, it's able to actually correlate that and not give an analyst, hey, this happened 8 times. No, it just happened once. It just happened to pass through 8 sensors. The other thing with some of the newer technologies is they can put sensors out in the cloud. So VTAPs or AWS Mirror Tap, actually grabbing that traffic that's passing through the cloud and saying, hey, what's going on? You don't want a blind spot in the cloud. And a lot of enterprises they're talking about security in the cloud, but they're not actually deploying security capabilities to monitor in the cloud.
One of the things that maybe somebody who's listening to this will say is, well, no, we have security. We have Amazon or Microsoft or IBM or Google or whomever. That is not quite enough. They're helping. It's important to make sure you hit the right button to turn things on. But what you're talking about is really the next level because of the traffic, because of how much traffic, because of all the, if you will, the hub and spoke model, if you will. There's so many different spokes coming into the hub. Walk me through a little bit about and this gets to the data challenge too. Walk me through about why having sensors in the cloud, why having this network detection and response capability at your security operations center is becoming more important than ever.
Yeah, I think the way I look at cloud, and it's difficult for some people to understand, that the cloud service provider, their security, the security that they advertise is for their system. They're going to secure their backplane and make sure that bad guys don't get into their network. When you go to the cloud, especially infrastructure as a service, it's kind of like self-service storage. So you're getting a garage and it's up to you to provide the lock, and it's up to you to provide any other type of security that you might want in there. So, if you're just putting some used furniture out there, you probably don't need that much security. But if you're storing, let's say, cash, you might want to hire some people and put some video machines around there. You have to do the same thing with the cloud. You have to have a concerted monitoring effort. How am I going to monitor that cloud? And what you see with a lot of enterprises is a lot of cloud projects are very siloed. So it's, hey, we have a team, they're putting together a case management system, and that team runs that cloud environment and they make sure it's secure. But the problem is they're looking at security as, are all my switches turned on? Are all my firewall settings correct? Who's actually monitoring that cloud environment? And that's where I think enterprises really need to take a hard look and understand, is my SOC tied into the cloud? And do I have my sensor grid in the cloud with all my projects? Because if you don't, your SOC is going to have a really big blind spot. And so that's where some of these new NDR capabilities can come in, where you can put these small V sensors, in certain projects, and it doesn't really require a lot of overhead, but you have to make a concerted effort to do it.
I think that's a great point. You can't have the blind spot, because we know what happens when you have a blind spot, whether you're driving or in the cloud. One of the things you mentioned as well is the amount of data. And you talked about, it used to be 5 megabytes was a lot, and now we're up to 40 gigabytes in some cases. And you also talked about AI and ML. Knit that all together for me. As agencies are dealing with the volume, velocity, variety of data, they need help, they need automation, they need new tools. What does these NDR capabilities bring to the forefront to help deal with this volume of data?
Yeah, the NDR is really a neat product because cost effective wise, I can put a number of sensors out there. I don't have to put endpoint agents out there. I don't have to talk to 15 different groups that have different maybe laptop or desktop settings, right? It's very easy to deploy. I basically put a tap in on a switch. I need some help from the network guys, but it's pretty cost effective, and you get a very broad monitoring capability. You're seeing all that traffic. A lot of it's mixed. If most federal agencies have multiple components, so you're able to provide wide coverage to all those components without having to bother those components. And then if they want enhanced monitoring, let's say a component says, hey, we've got a project that's a little more sensitive, you can add more capability in that area and monitor more of that traffic.
And I think one of the things that we're hearing is, as the modern attackers, I'll use your word instead of advanced attackers, as they get better and they're always changing, it's this idea of the defenders have to be right every time and the attackers only have to be right once. Are you seeing a move among agencies to implement more of these automation. We hear a lot about it, but our agencies actually moving towards automation, orchestration, and the like?
I think everybody would like to, but unfortunately, with automation, it requires you know some kind of a sameness within the enterprise. So, especially with federal agencies, like I said, they're highly federated. So it's difficult to say, okay, for agency, and for component X, do this. For component Y, do this. For component Z, do this. So I think the automation, there's a lot of promise in that. We just need to get to the point where agencies are willing to kind of give up that control to the security team. I always tell people the attackers are moving at cyber speed. So if you're not moving at cyber speed, you're going to be behind the power curve. One of the things I always tell people is, you should be sandboxing and quarantining emails. Don't just let it come into the environment and then throw a detection. You need to stop that. So I know a lot of people like to block the attack, and that's an easy way to do it. But once they're inside, you need a good capability to detect that. And what you were saying about, hey, the attacker only has to be right once. With good technologies, really, the attacker has to be right every step of the way. They have to, somehow get somebody to click on a link or get some software in there. Then they have to be able to move around. So as the attacker moves down the chain, there's more opportunities to detect what they're doing. And NDR is kind of an addition or a tool to add that.
Brian, we're just about out of time. Before I let you go, we've had a great conversation about the different capabilities, the reemergence of NDR, and why it's important because of SolarWinds breach. What's the takeaway from our conversation? What's the important thing that agencies and other organizations should really keep in mind as they are improving their cyber capabilities, as they're moving forward? Even what's a common mistake we should avoid? I mean, you mentioned earlier, you got to know what you have. You have to have a good inventory. It has to be an up-to-date inventory. What else can you tell us?
Yeah, I think, like I said, NDR it's kind of a lost art, and it's coming back. It's just a different approach. So we used to focus on malicious code and signatures. Now we're focused on kind of behavior. I think some of the things that enterprises should really look at is what's going on inside my network, deep inside my network, not just at the perimeter, because you have so many paths outside of your network these days with cloud and express route and software as a service. You need to be monitoring what's going on inside your network very carefully, and you need to have a good approach. But you need a technology that's not going to be putting 15,000 alerts every day to the analyst. So you need it kind of goes into the automation. You need something that's going to take all that data, and that's where the AI and the ML can really help. So if you're not modernizing that internal network monitoring, I think you're going to have a difficult time.
All right. I know we could talk longer, but unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. So first, let me thank my guest. Brian Varine is the Associate Director of Guidehouse Advanced Cyber Solutions. Brian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion, Why Network Detection Matters More Than Ever on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Vectra.